Dr. Caroline Leaf, welcome back to the show. The first time you were on 2 years ago, it was the MyFit podcast. Things have changed since then. We're now the Mindset Advantage podcast. But one thing still for sure, we want you to be back on the show. You have a brand new book. The first episode was incredible. I know we're going to get into some awesome stuff today. Welcome back.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be with you, DJ. And I'm so pleased that it was a great response to the other book. It's always fun talking to you.
Thank you. The first book was Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess. It's about 2 years ago. Phenomenal book. I have it here. Second book comes out today, August 8th, and it's called How to Help Your Child Clean Up Their Mental Mess. I've already read it one time, and I'm already in the next time through. It's a phenomenal read. It's very applicable for the people that are listening to the show. What I like to ask authors, Dr. Caroline, first is why this book and why right now?
Well, one of the main reasons is, as we're all aware, that mental health crisis has just got worse and worse and worse. And when they do these global surveys of different countries, normally adults come out worse than children, and children are actually coming out worse than adults in the most recent surveys. Not only that, is that we constantly hearing all the time the messaging of increased suicide, increased depression, increased anxiety. And then there's always this thing that, oh, it's social media. And there's so much talk around it, and there's so much concern and worry. And I've been in the field for nearly 40 years now, and I've practiced for 25. And I've watched the trajectory over these years of what's been happening. And the reason I brought this book out right now is because of the talk of the increase in mental health issues. But what I'm more concerned is about how they're talking about it, because mental health has always been an issue. Every generation faces different things. We happen to be dealing with the age of technology that has made information more accessible and has sped things up such a lot and has made it, things like bullying and that kind of thing isn't just at school. It's now goes home with you on your phone, and it's in bed with you. And so there's a difference in the sort of frequency and time frame of how we connect with each other and the access. And that certainly is different. But in the previous generations, they also faced issues. So I think the fact that we linking the current mental health crisis to things like social media alone is incorrect. I think that's only one of the factors. And I don't think it's even really social media per se, or technology per se, or AI per se. I think it's rather mind management of that. So it's the whole management of the aspect. So we teach our children, for example, how to understand that when you look at someone on social media and you look at what the ideal, body image issues, or you look at what someone else is achieving in their life, we know it's curated, but it's very hard to separate yourself from that when you immerse yourself in this person's life and what seems to be the ideal life, and you don't see yourself in that, and you compare yourself. That if that's not managed, you can go down a rabbit hole. So I think the issue, I believe, and from my research and research of scientists like myself in the field, this problem is not one of social media or COVID. Those are contributing factors. It's more, how do we manage the issue? So we'll have a challenge, and if we just let the challenge go unmanaged, it becomes a big mental health problem. But if we have a challenge and we know how to manage it, and we up our skills on mind management, then we can be more effective in the challenge. So in previous generations, they had to do the same thing. As a challenge came up, they had to learn how to manage the challenge. I don't think we've done that very well at all in this generation. In the last 4 generations, if you think of the last 40 years, because also we've shifted our philosophy in the last 40, 50 years since the advent of drugs, psychoactive drugs that change the brain, that are used as psychotropics for people with so-called mental health illnesses. Since that advent, there's been an explosion of diagnosing and medicating people under a biomedical model, which is the same model that's used for something like diabetes or cancer. And if we track, it's very interesting, if we track that shift, it parallels the shift in what we see happening in mental health. So as that took dominance, that biomedical model took dominance, mental health actually got worse. So I think the number one factor for the mental health crisis, and the number one reason I wrote this book, is because of the mismanagement of the mental health crisis. And number two, the reasons behind it, which is number two is that this whole shift in looking at the holistic person within the environment, shift to the reducing people down to a biomedical model, the reductionistic theory. So last thing around that, the third sort of area there is what we should be doing is following the research. And if research tells us that something's good and things are improving, stick with what works. But if research is showing, hey, this is not improving, things are actually getting worse, then we must go back to basics and ask ourselves again, hey, this is not working. Shouldn't we be looking at what we're doing and changing it? And that isn't being done. That's also why I wrote this book, is the research shows that the biomedical model for mental health is not working, that medicating, labeling, and diagnosing, or diagnosing, labeling, and medicating is not working. Therefore, we need to challenge that model. It's not scientific, it's not working. So we need to equip parents and adults and children with an alternative, more accurate scientific model. And that's why I wrote this book, because that's what I provide, is an alternative solution.
I love hearing
Does
your
that make
passion.
sense?
It does make sense. And I love hearing your passion to it. I just want to have you keep going, Dr. Caroline. So we know what the problem is. What's the answer? What's step one here? I'm ready to hear it.
Well, step one in the mental health crisis with children is to help adults to help themselves. Because the adults how a child responds to stress and anxiety is very much modeled after how the parent or the teacher or the caregiver is managing their own anxiety. So the number one thing to help the mental health crisis is to help the adults, the parents, the caregivers. And then, so therefore, the previous book that you actually interviewed me about becomes a vital tool in the mental health crisis, in me being able to understand and manage my own issues. And no one's excluded from managing their issues. That's why I called my book Cleaning Up the Mental Mess, my podcast called Cleaning Up the Mental Mess. My previous books, these two books have both got that in the title. My other books don't. But the concept is that all of us are battling on a continuum, with 1, 2, and 3 being your day-to-day struggles, 8, 9, 10 being the really extreme stuff, and then in between. So we're always somewhere on that scale, or a combination on that scale. So therefore, as adults, step number one is to recognize where we're at on the scale, and to have a plan in place that we are managing our mind, because mind drives everything. Mind is our aliveness. Mind is not our brain. Our brain just does what our mind tells it to do. So we've got to manage our mind as adults. That's number one. And we can talk in more depth about how to do that as well. Then number two is we need to give our children the tools for how to manage their own minds. So just a little simple case in point, or a simple example. Let's say that you've had a hectic day. You've got maybe 1, 2, or 3 kids. You've had a hectic day at work. There's accumulation of things happening, maybe at work, happening in your life, maybe a sick parent, maybe a financial crisis, maybe a bit of a relationship issue with a partner, maybe whatever, a combination of things, maybe something going on with a friend, going on with a child, or something like that. You come home from work and you walk in the door. It's summer holidays and it's chaotic in your house as you walk in. You're really strained and stressed to the point where you feel burnt out and overwhelmed, and you trip over the kids' toys, and there's a noise and there's a mess, and there's just chaos, and nothing's been done, and you just lose it, and you yell at your kids, maybe say something that you wish you wouldn't say. If you just feel so overwhelmed, and like go in the room and slam the door, and the kids are kind of left hanging, and then you start feeling guilty, and then there's this whole guilt thing that happens. And so what we can do in a situation like that is, instead of suppressing it and pushing it down and pretending nothing's happened, and just coming out of your room and just like saying, okay, let's just make dinner, or let's just do your homework, or let's just tidy up this mess, the children are left hanging, you left hanging, and that doesn't create a good atmosphere in the home, nor in oneself. So a good first step there is for one to authentically, as the adult, do something about what's just happened. So you can go through the system that I talked about in the first book, which is called the neurocycle, which is a system I developed over 38 years ago, which I developed as to help people with traumatic brain injuries and learning disabilities and dementias and traumatic events and just day-to-day struggles. And then I adapted it and researched it, and I still do clinical trials and still do research and publish and so on adapting that and improving it. In essence, the neurocycle is a way that we can stand back with our wise mind, observe our messy responses, our messy mind, and then direct our minds, manage the messiness, which then changes the neuroplasticity of the brain. So in other words, rewire the networks of the brain and also of the body. In other words, the neurocycle is how we systematically change the psychoneurobiology, or the psychoneurobiological networks, or the networks that make us human and enable us to respond. So how we show up is the result of these psychoneurobiological networks. So if we messy, we've wired in a messy psychoneurobiological network. If it's unmanaged, it stays unmanaged and messy. Then we show up as messy. So that situation I've just described is a messy situation accumulating from a series of messiness, and it can just stay messy and get worse, or we can stand back and actually do something about that. And the simple neurocycle is a simple basic 5-step process, but based on very strong scientific premises of each step doing certain things in the mind brain body connection. And so the first thing you do is just gather awareness of your responses. Maybe you come out your room and you say to the kids, hey guys, I'm sorry, I was so frustrated. So you just say a simple sentence, I was frustrated. So that's your emotional signal. You're describing how you showed up. In other words, gathering awareness is just to sort of analyze and describe in 4 simple sentences how you showed up, because there's 4 categories of signals that we show up in. So you describe, I was so frustrated and irritated, maybe 2, 3, however many emotions you want to say. Then you would say that my whole body was tense. That's why I kind of leaned in and yelled at you and had a scary face. So bodily sensation, which is the second category. I yelled at you in a nasty voice and said some unkind things, behaviors, what you say and what you do and how you say and do them. And I just felt that just feels like this is constantly going on. So my attitude or perspective, outlook is that this is just an ongoing problem. So you basically, age appropriate, would say 4 sentences. Depending on your child. If a child's 2, you're not going to quite be as detailed versus if a child's 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 or an adolescent or whatever. But you basically, in a couple of seconds, you kind of say those as one rolling sentence. Then you go into the next step, which is, okay, now I've gathered awareness. As soon as I've gathered awareness in my brain, I've actually brought this network into the conscious mind, so I can actually change it. Now you reflect, which is like a prism. You're shining a light through a prism, and it's starting to give you depth, it's starting to give you reason, you're starting to see the why. So you're starting to ask, why did I do this? Well, I was just really frustrated about it. I had a hard day at work and there was just too much noise, and this is just it's like a pattern. And then so you just say a few words, you're starting to ask the why, then you write that down. Now what's great as a parent at home is to delegate or designate an area in your home, like paint a wall in your kitchen or something with chalk paint, and then have a box of chalk paint there, or have a notepad somewhere and a box of toys and chalk and pens and crayons and that kind of stuff. And you grab the chalk and just go to the chalkboard and draw a face that's upside down, smiley face, maybe write a few words. In other words, you put what you've gathered awareness of and what you've reflected on very quickly. It's 30 seconds each, and you just draw that all over the board. This invites collaboration and deep, meaningful connection from your children. It brings order out of chaos. It actually starts connecting networks in your brain that you can go deep inside the unconscious mind and start sorting out the roots of the problem and bringing order out of chaos. And then you would move into the recheck step 4, which is, okay, this is, so I had a hard day at work. These are all the things that are happening. I need to see, this is a pattern. Have I been grumpy quite a lot lately? Yes, Mom, you've been shouting a lot lately. You seem to be quite, and you have this discussion where you're rechecking and looking for patterns and triggers and antidotes and reconceptualizations and different lenses and working towards a solution. And then you end off, okay, so what's my solution? I need to maybe not work so much, or I need to talk to my boss, or I need to make sure that I can, that you kids can maybe tidy up your toys before I get home, or whatever. So you get to some sort of solution, and then you end off with a little active reach, which is, whew, we've got our little solution. We're not going to solve it all today. I'll have to look at this in more depth if we've started the process, but let's go and do something nice together. Let's go and watch a TV show together, or make dinner together, or play with our puppy together, something like that. And so it took longer for me to explain than to do it. You can do this whole thing that I've done literally in a minute. And that 5-step process, following that order, has changed the whole neurophysiology of your mind-brain-body connection, enabling you to be empowered to get control. You've now done the oxygen mask principle, where you have given yourself oxygen, and now you can help the child. So now you've modeled for the child that when they feel frustrated and they've had a bad day, or they've had a fight with a sibling, or something's going on at school, the adults in the homes, the adults in the home, they also battle, and it's okay to battle. It's a valid response to life. Life is full of challenges. I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to suppress my emotions. If I'm feeling emotional, I can go through these are the tools that I can do to make myself feel better. And that's what this book is all about. This book is all about how to do this for yourself, how to do this for your child, how to teach this to a child as young as 2, how to teach them what the brain is, what the mind is, what thoughts are, all the stuff that how the neurocycle works. And it's full of practical tools and tips as well to make it very simple.
And the last 5 minutes was 40 years of research down into 5 minutes. It's very impressive.
There you
And
go.
I love the system. I wanna put it on pause. I wanna come back to it, but something else you talked about that I think that leads well into this is you just did a podcast on it. It was phenomenal. I listened to it this morning about, well, what do you do, Dr. Caroline, right before you're about to lose your cool on your child? I think a lot of people listening, they're nodding their head like, "Yes, I've been there before." Right beforehand, is this the time to use the neurocycle, or what do we do right beforehand?
Absolutely. So right before you can, as your child, you maybe pick up your child from school, or there's something going on and they're doing something again that just, it's like this is the tipping point, you're about to lose it. So your reactivity is, as you described, it's at a high level. So here you can just create some mental space. Either go to a separate place in your house, walk to another room, tell them that, listen, I just need to do something quickly. Don't try not let all your emotions of anger, frustration, reactivity come through. Just say, I need 5 minutes just to do something, just to either, you can even tell your kids, I just need to calm down before I respond. If you can't physically move away, then look away, do something in the kitchen, or pack something, or just find something to do that you can actually just go into a mental space even for a minute. And then in that you go through those 5 steps. The reason you go through the 5 steps, and then we're going to add in another little preparation phase as well, is because it is going to calm down your neurophysiology, and it's going to get you in a space where you clean the windscreen wipers off the car if you're driving through a storm. That's what you're literally doing. So you've got clarity of mind and wisdom. So when you do speak, you're going to speak from a place of empowerment and not from reactivity. So you're literally in that space, either in another room or either looking away, doing something in the kitchen. You're just quickly going to say to yourself, I'm feeling so reactive. I am so mad. I have had enough. I'm about to explode. My whole body is so tense. I've got my heart's palpitating and I can't stand this situation anymore. So you're saying that silently in your head. You're validating, you're allowing yourself to express those emotions. You're not letting guilt hold you back or suppress. You're getting it out, but in a way that you're controlling it. You're not like splashing it all over the kitchen, all over your kids. You're getting yourself under control. Just doing that, you're going to feel better. But let's say that you can't even say that yet. Let's say that you're in such a highly activated state that you need to decompress first. Then you do brain preparation. And you'll see I talk about this in the book. I spoke about it in the Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess book you interviewed me on before. And I have an app as well, which I think you also know about, called the Neurocycle app, which is a great tool to have to just learn the system where I'm taking you through it audio. So it's literally me giving you therapy. We've got, by the way, DJ, a parent add-on that will be in by September. So by next month, it will be into the app so parents can use it then for their children,
Awesome.
the neurocycle. So you may want to just do, as you look away, before you do start the 5 steps, you may just want to do a bit of calming down, because your neurochemicals, your heart, your cardiovascular system, everything is HPA axis is off point at this stage. So if decompression takes a little bit of time, so we do a bit of so let me say it like this: brain preparation to calm yourself down is called brain preparation. Brain preparation can be done very quickly in just 10 seconds, or it can be done in 3 to 5 to 15 minutes, depending on the extent. In this stage, at this point, you may not have 15 minutes, you may only have 10 seconds. So if you've only got 10 seconds, you do this. You breathe in for 3 counts, but like a really deep breath, that your whole chest and your stomach and everything is like pushed out, okay? And then you hold it for like, breathe in, and then you push out for 7. Like really force it out, that you can, like a balloon deflating. As you do it, I don't know if you felt that you could feel at the front of your brain like a bit of a high. That's good. That it has force, that the more force you use, the greater intensity you do this breathing 10-second pause with, the more oxygen you'll push in the front of your brain. When you do that, you'll increase blood flow and you'll increase what we call low gamma. When the low gamma wave increases in the front of the brain, along with oxygen and blood flow, you are going to calm down your neurophysiology very fast. You're still going to be mad. You're still going to want to scream and throw everything around the kitchen, but you're going to be in a better state. So you can do that in 10 seconds. If you have longer, do as many of those 10 seconds as you can. Generally, one will help, but 60 to 90 seconds, so 6 to 9 times is fantastic. But if you can get 1 or 2 in, that's also going to help you a lot. Then you're going to move into, okay, I'm mad, frustrated, whatever the sentences I said earlier on. And why am I feeling like this? well, I'm feeling like this because this is happening so much. Then you may not have time to write things down. So you go into the third phase, which is write, draw, visualize, write, draw, enact, or visualize. So it's a genetic process where you're collapsing a wave of energy in your brain into either writing or visualizing or drawing or enacting. In this case, the quickest is going to be visualize. So imagine that you're literally holding a video camera, holding up the video thing on your phone, and you're watching, you're pressing play on a video that you videoed, and you're watching a video. And you can train yourself to do this very quickly. So you're going to watch the video, and what you're watching is, this happens all the time. What happens all the time? Press play, watch quickly, and your memories inside those thought networks will come back very quickly, and you'll see this is happening consistently. And so just spend 10 seconds there, just watching that video, then go into the fourth step and say, okay, this is happening all the time, but this is not who my child is. This is happening because of, and I obviously haven't managed to find the because of, because this is still happening. And I need to now start getting to the cause of it. Now that alone has brought the networks to the top of your mind, into your consciousness, weakened the protein branches, helped to start rebuilding the network, remolding, calm down the neurophysiology, increased wisdom, increased clarity of mind, focus, attention, wisdom, all these great things. So then your action can be, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn around now and I'm going to say to my child or my children, I see that you're really battling. I see that there's a pattern happening, that you seem to be X, Y, and Z, but in a gentle, calm voice that is going to neutralize the situation. Can we sit down and can I teach you the neurocycle? And this is this tool, and Dr. Lee showed me, and so it's not me making up something as the parent. Some brain doctors said, and then show the book, have the book and say, oh, we can listen to it on the audio, and let me help you, because it's helped me so much. I just used it now to calm down so that I wouldn't yell at you and be nasty or say something I don't mean, because I love you and I care for you. Something like that. So that's your first step, your active reach is, I'm going to calmly and whatever, and then you actually do it. So that is the first step. And then the first step is the action. So you connect with your child, and you may have to start say, hey, listen, let's breathe together. Let me show you what I did. Let me show you what I did, and then model what you went through to help you. And all the time prefacing it with, I know this is not who you are. I know that the things you're saying and doing is just because you're trying to tell me something. And I'm really sorry that I haven't actually tuned in and helped you, but I really want to help you now. I don't understand it, but I do know that you need my support and you need my help, and I'm here and I'm willing. Should we go to that part of should we go sit on the neurocycle chair or the mind management chair or the, whatever. And that works really well. I've had patients who've painted a wall in their house with a chalkboard, like in the kitchen, put a cute little bench there or a comfortable little bean bag of a cushion, a little basket of toys, maybe the book. I even have a character. We've created a little character called Brainy. Did you see in the book that I put that there's a little cartoon character
I did, super cute.
called Brainy, and Brainy is a mental health the mental health character Brainy. There's a little toy. We've even got the toy that you can get. There's the brain. So they control Brainy. It just makes the whole mental health journey more fun. And Brainy's walks the mental health journey with you, and he's got a superpower called the neurocycle. So in the book, I give you all the languaging of how to use the Brainy as a visual and as a point of contact. And you could have Brainy there, you could have the book there, you could have, we've even got a coloring book. So people can get the coloring book and the toy, and that goes along with Brainy, color with Brainy and Friends. And it's got all kinds of scenarios with blank pages and things where they can color it in and talk it through and write in there and all that kind of stuff. So you're creating a dedicated mind management lifestyle area. Now, you as a mind coach, you understand the importance of, you coach athletes. They are very diligent in the process. We've got to be as diligent in the process of managing our mind. We've got to teach this to our kids from young. I've taught the system to kids as young as 2 and 3 in my practice. And my own children are all adults now. They learned this when they were as young as 2 and 3. I started teaching this to them. So this book now currently is for 2 to 10-year-olds, 11, 12, whatever, but then they can use the older book. They can use the other book that I interviewed you for if they sort of 13, 14 onwards. So that's that gives you, does that answer your question?
Absolutely, it does. And what we started with was what to do when you're about to lose your cool. I got to ask the other side too, Dr. Caroline. What about, hey, I lost my cool. It's a little too late, and I'm feeling guilty as a parent for either what I said, did, etc. What is the advice on the other side of the fence after you've lost your cool? You're feeling guilty.
So similar to good, fantastic question, and similar to the first scenario I created where you walked in the front door and yelled and all that kind of stuff. Let's say that there's been a consistent pattern of maybe you've got a child, even whatever age, and there's definitely a very challenging mental health behavioral issue that they're going through. Maybe there's serious things like, cutting or not eating or, withdrawing or just not talking, things that are very difficult to deal with that can really frustrate a parent, especially when you've tried and you just can't seem to get through to the child. And then you do say things like, I can't stand this. You're always doing this. And that's kind of, you always doing is something you are. Those are the statements we don't want to say to our kids, but we do. And you are is such a defined, oh, that's who I am, I can't change. That's how a child reads that kind of statement. So the best thing to do is to take ownership and to say to the child, I'm, and you go through the neurocycle, you just say, hey, I'm said some things that I shouldn't have said. That's behavior. I said X, Y, and Z. I actually know that hurt you. And I feel so bad, emotions. I feel very guilty. And I really did not mean to
Mm.
hurt you with those words. And I know that my body language was very harsh as well. And I know that I was looking you, I know that that made you feel like I had kind of maybe given up on you. So you've just identified those four, so you've taken ownership of how you've gone through your four signals that you generated to your child. And then you can go into why. I did this because I just seem to be not getting anywhere. I haven't been, I don't know how to help you, but I'm so desperate to help you that my care and my love for you has led me to this level of frustration. And I'm saying all the wrong things, but I really want to help you and I need to know from you how to help you. I've got some tools in place that I know, and I've got years of experience of just being an adult, and we can get a therapist and we can get help, but I just want to help you. And then you can, that's sort of this that's sort of a kind of I should have identified each step. So the why, the second part would have been you explaining why you did that because you were frustrated and couldn't help. The third thing would have been maybe just to write down a few notes, just sit next to them or on the board again, just to write down, how you feel, that maybe a circle in the middle and the four different signals. I did this, I said that. So you guys are not looking at each other so much as looking at the written thing. You've taken the focus of the eye contact for a moment and you've put it onto this piece of paper, onto the board, which is also a very calming kind of thing to do. And then together you can look at that and say, look, I did this didn't help you. And then they can say, yes, that made me feel like this. So now the recheck is where you can collaborate and interact on the discussion between the impact of your words on them. And that opens the door to them, to a conversation, which is your active reach, closing that off, saying, okay, can we talk about this? Now you start another neurocycle. And then you start, let's talk about let me help you do this. Let's talk about your feelings. Let's talk about your behaviors. And so you then start another neurocycle and you keep cycling. So the neurocycle is the process that we go to get everything lined up that we can actually connect and communicate and resolve. If it's all over the place, if you do a bit of, this is my feeling, and here's a technique, and there's a bit of breathing, and if it's jumbled, each thing in isolation all over the place doesn't work as well. So I'm not saying throw out the techniques and the advice that you have already been giving yourself or your child, or both. Use all of them, but you need to put them in the right sequence. Otherwise, the networks won't change, and then the behavior will persist. And you also won't get the insight that you need to find the cause and the root. Because when you start the second neurocycle, for example, with your child, once you've gone through yours and you say, okay, let's try and work through yourself, because if I made you feel like that, I'm so sorry. But let's talk about why you are feeling like this, why are you going through this. These are the patterns I've observed. No judgment. This is a safe space. When we sit in this area and we talk about this stuff and we do the neurocycle, this is a safe space. This is where you are validated. No matter what you say, I still love you. That's the kind of language I'm going to bring to the party. That really works around helping to move the situation forward into a positive place.
To me, there's a ton of value in each of these 5 steps, but I almost think there's, the most value in step number 1. gathering awareness and labeling the emotions, even Dr. Caroline, just having that conversation of labeling emotions, just starting with that could be such a big step for people. I'm curious, I would also imagine though, there's some ways that you could label emotions incorrectly. I'm thinking of things that, like you said, you are always this, or, saying something in more of a negative tone. Sometimes when teaching frameworks, I think it's helpful to show the opposite side to give some polarization. What's the wrong way to do step one? What is a way that parents should not be gathering awareness or not be labeling? What does that look like? The not so good way?
Okay, very good question. Just quickly want to stress there that all
Yes.
5 steps are equally important.
Mhm.
But you're quite right in step one, starting the process. And if I may give you an analogy, it's like flying a plane. If you think about this, when we think of the whole neurocycle like flying a plane. So the first thing that the engineers, and this then I will go to the detail of that second part of your question, but this will kind of set up the answer. So let's say that, I mean, what do they do? The engineers on board checking things with the pilot, then the pilot and the co-pilot go through a checklist so that they don't just take off. There's been a whole lot of preparation before, then there's the preparation with the engineer, then there's the preparation of the pilot and the co-pilot. All of that can be likened to meditation, breathing, mindfulness, all of those kinds of things. But if you stop there, what the research shows and what my clinical experience, and not only mine, but colleagues in the field as well, is that if you just do those, it's a band-aid. You're not flying the plane yet. You're not moving. You're kind of stuck. So now you go back into life, and you can't keep meditating through your math lesson or through the playground. You can have certain things you can do in your mind and say to yourself. You can have certain affirmations and things which are more of an active reach as opposed to brain prep. So what we see from the research and clinically is that if you just do those, you start to bring things up. And then that can create a problem because you've got to go beyond that. People can feel worse. What do I do now? I've
Great
got
point.
this
Great point.
float around. Then what happens is the pilots take off. Very specific, following the airport tower, all that kind of thing. Very focused, very organized. That's the gather awareness. That's why we say the word gather. It's not just awareness, it's gather. Awareness is mindfulness, it's brain prep. Gather means I'm specifically going to hone in order to take off this plane. I have to hone in on what are my behaviors, what am I saying, what am I doing, and how am I doing it, what are my emotions, etc. Then if I just stop there, and emotions are easy, everyone talks about emotions. Most of the books for kids are about label your emotions. It's the easiest thing to do, and there is a right and wrong way, and we're going to get to that. But if I just label my emotions, I'm also going to make things worse, because now what? So now I'm aware and I've labeled, now what? So what
Yes.
happened? The equivalent would be the pilot never learned to fly the plane. All the pilot had learned to do was to take off. What is going to happen? The plane will crash. Okay, so the pilot has to know how to take off and fly the plane. So once we've gathered awareness, when we're going to reflect and write and recheck and the creation of the active reach, we are flying the plane. As we do the active reach, we land the plane. So we have to go through the entire cycle. We have to go beyond mindfulness and brain meditation. In other words, we have to do brain prep and we have to do the 5 steps.
I
Okay,
love
so
that.
the right way and the wrong way. Emotions, there are no bad emotions. Okay, so think of emotions on a scale with your balance thingy in between. And in this scale are all the things like happiness and joy and excitement and what would be labeled as your healthy emotions or positive emotions. On this side are the emotions that are maybe on the darker side, like depression and anxiety and frustration and envy and jealousy and bitterness and etc. Now, none of those are bad. Okay, it's not that these are good and these are bad. It's that these are healthy and these are maybe unhealthy, or these are good and these are, I don't like to say the word bad, but they're balanced. Now we have to have a bit of depression and anxiety and a bit of jealousy and a bit of envy. And this may sound so weird, but that's part of our human nature. If we didn't have a spark of jealousy, that jealousy, if we know if it's balanced, like look how balanced this is, the spark of jealousy of maybe or envy of someone else actually makes, if we in a balanced state, we will manage that and say, oh, okay, I'm feeling envious or jealous. That's information. It's not something bad, it's information. I need to pay attention and find out why so that I can restore, because if I don't, the envy and jealousy will tip the scale, and now the envy and jealousy becomes consuming and it becomes a problem. But when it's here, it becomes part of my life development, my growth pattern. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
Okay, so therefore, that's the one thing to remember is we should never label emotions bad or good. We should label emotions healthy so all emotions is healthy, only becoming bad or unhealthy if they're not managed and they start tipping. So the scale concept, you can even get a scale and you can put in a bunch of stuff in a scale and well, they can tip and that kind of thing. So emotions are giving you information. They're giving you very good information because they're telling you something about yourself. So if it's one of the ones in this side that's excitement, well, pay attention, because the more you want to grow that excitement, because that increases resilience in your brain. And the more resilience we unmask in our brain and develop and grow in our brain, the more prepared we are for life challenges. Okay, so that's the basic principle operating there. Then on this side of the coin, we've said that. So in terms of how to speak to our kids about emotions, I give some really good examples in the book, but to say something like "you are,"
Mm-hmm.
you are bad. You are always angry. It's not the truth that a person's always bad or always angry. And the word like bad as well, to use that as a description, it's such a definitive thing. You are statements are putting someone in a box by a parent, someone who's in authority or someone that you care about. So it's taken into us as I'm a bad person. I'm useless. There's no hope. Why should I even bother? And for someone that you love, when someone that you love and you care for says that to you, it's really a stab in the gut. It's bad enough if it's someone that you don't know, but if you don't know someone, if like a professor or a teacher at school or a colleague at work will very seldom say, you are stupid, you are useless, unless it's in an argument. It's more like, hey, you're showing, and it's much more subtle. So think of it like that. We've got to be much more descriptive, rather describe. I see that you seem to, not you are, we've got to try and get away from the you are. I see, describe. I see that you're crying more often, you seem to feel more sad, you seem to be more angry, you seem to be more irritated, you seem to be more frustrated. So I'm using seem to be as opposed to are. So it's not so I've made the decision, it's stamped in, the stamped and sealed and done deal. It's open to discussion. It's not who you are as a whole person. It's a state that you're in at the moment. And you can even add on, I see lately, or I see today, or so that you put a time frame. Always is a terrible word to use,
Mm-hmm.
because it always implies that there's just no hope. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And you said in your book, and I love this too because it goes along with my mental performance coaching, is that feelings are information, not facts. So to dovetail around that, a lot of clients of mine, they struggle with, pregame nerves or not feeling confident. And these are all feelings, not facts. I love the way you frame that. Just because you feel that way isn't factual. It's just information. It's how you process that information. I'd love for you to talk about how that shows up in your work. Feelings are information, not facts.
Absolutely. So when we take that statement, it opens up a whole opportunity to be curious. Okay, so if it's information, what is that information? Do I need to pay attention to it? Is it something that's useful for me? What's useful? What's not useful? What can I learn from this? So it's you come into it very curious. So I'm feeling envy. Why? Like I gave that example. Oh, I'm feeling envy because there's a level of frustration with where I'm at the moment, and I see that person's doing that. And can I do that? Is it a realistic goal? Every person's unique. Can I things like envy and jealousy? If it starts tipping, actually start destroying your networks of your brain. That creates a destructive pattern in the brain, and it drops your intelligence. And but whereas if we celebrate someone else's achievement, and then it actually enhances brain health and enhances intelligence. So by knowing that factor, okay, I'm feeling envious. If it tips, it's going to do these things to my brain. I want to be happy for that person. I can't seem to be happy for that person. So I need to know why. Why do I feel this level of envy? Is it because I want that? Why do I want that? What is it about that I want? And when you dig down deep, you start getting to the core issues of why am I not feeling this confidence? Am I comparing myself? Is that a good thing to do? Can I? And then you kind of unpack it and in the unpacking, you basically going through a neurocycle, because you're gathering awareness of that emotion. Then emotions never live alone. And this is the big thing that people make a lot of mistake with in just general talking. We'll talk about emotions, or we'll
Mhm.
talk about behaviors as though they're separate things, and they sound separate, but they're not. They're signals. There's four. However, how I feel always has behaviors attached to it. If I feel envious, I'm going to act in a certain way, behavior. I'm going to speak in a certain way. I'm going to speak with like a frustration and that envious tone and words that come out that are, like not nice words. I'm going to feel a tension in my body somewhere. And it's going to shift my perspective. Damn, is this ever going to go right for me? So those always go together. So we've got to be careful of, that's why you can't just talk about an emotion. You identify four, but they work together as a unit. And that's really important to help a person to move forward. We often don't move forward if you just go with emotions. In fact, you won't. You have to bring all of them together. And if you listen to your languaging, you'll see you actually do bring them all in. We do, but we bring them in a haphazard way. So the more ordered and organized you are, the more efficiently you're going to make changes in your life.
I love that. I want to close down with talking about just some more applicable items, and you have such a great Instagram page that's full of these. And another word that gets talked about a lot, Dr. Caroline, if you want to talk about it, we can, is about anxiety. I think we've heard that term now probably more than ever, and especially it almost seems like it's getting younger and younger that we are labeling kids to have anxiety. We go down a path on whether that's the right call or not. But anyway, you have a post that was really cool. It's called "A Simple Calming Activity for Anxious Kids. Gently ask your child, and it's a 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1." I think this is just a cool, fun activity and a takeaway for parents. Would you mind taking the floor on that?
Absolutely. So just the word anxiety itself is essentially an emotional warning signal. So it's taken on a life of its own because of the fact that it is, because of the biomedical model. So it's almost seen as the equivalent of something like diabetes.
Mm,
So you get diabetes type 1, you get anxiety. They seen, and the assumption there is, we know that diabetes type 1 is a problem with your pancreas, the insulin in your pancreas, and you can do tests to diagnose and link it back to the neurobiological underlying cause, and from there you can then move forward with a directed treatment. That works for diabetes type 1, does not work for the concept of anxiety, because anxiety isn't an it that has a specific neurobiological underlying cause. That concept and idea was never actually proved. And the papers that have been written about, the way it's written about in science, meta-analyses have been done to show that it's actually disproved to talk about mental health as anxiety as an actual illness. It's basically it's when we talk about the four signals, anxiety would fall under emotional signals, and it's a collection of description. It's a description that we make. So things like anxiety, ADHD, depression, all of these things aren't it's like diabetes type 1 or cancer or autoimmune disorders. They are descriptions of how a person is showing up. So that's really important to know. The reason that children young and young are being labeled with that is because anxiety is totally normal. It's one of the most normal reactions. You will feel anxious if you're about to go to a new school, if you've got to now integrate into a new friend group, if you've got to now integrate, it's the end of the summer holidays and you've been away from school for 2 months, now you've got to go back to school, you're getting a new teacher. It would be abnormal not to be anxious. So it is a very positive, life-saving a type of emotion that initiates a downflow into your behaviors and your body, whatever, to prepare you for situations, to be alert, to be focused, to go into high intelligence. What happens again is that we don't teach mind management, and if we see, oh, my child's anxious and they're anxious every day, there's something wrong, and they get labeled, that's tipping it in the wrong direction. We have to manage it, and this is why we have to give our kids tools from so young
mm,
on how to not label it in the wrong way. So what we've done is we have a whole generation of children, pretty much Gen Alpha, Gen Z. So your 2 to 10-year-olds, your adolescents, and your teenagers and your young adults, basically millennials, have grown up in the last 40 years. So, and the last 40 years, we've been told that, not I don't say it, but the general standard of care is that anxiety is an illness,
right.
and that if you have anxiety, there's something wrong with your brain. And you ask, well, why have I got something wrong with my brain? Because you've got anxiety. Why have you got
Mhm.
anxiety? Because there's something wrong with your brain. It's circular reasoning. So it hasn't solved the problem. And that's what we spoke about right in the beginning, is that reasoning's made things worse. So we've got to shift our conversation around it. The only reason we're hearing that there's more anxiety is because an anxiety is tipping is because we're not managing it correctly. It will tip if we don't manage it correctly. So we've got more kids tipping in this direction because we're not managing it. We can restore this by helping them with techniques like the 7 the 310 breathing, the 3-7 breathing, the 5-4-3-2-1. I'm trying to remember exactly what that particular post. I put up so many different posts. I'm going to have to quickly look at that post.
I'll walk you through it. So it's getting your child. It's about senses, right? So 5 things you see, 4 things you
That's right,
feel,
yeah.
three
Because there's
things you hear.
yeah, I remember that now. I've
Yeah.
got so
So
many different exercises. Yeah, okay. Yes, so you just basically, it's a simple, it's a very common technique. You'll see it all over the place. You can, there's the 3-2-1 version. That's what I was thinking of. So that's why I got muddled for a second. So it's, you can take any number. 5 might be too many, but you can use 5. So it's just basically going through your 5 senses. And it's very calming if something's worked, if a child's really worked up. So you could be driving in the car and they're going crazy and whatever, fighting or something like that, or they just come home from school and they're really anxious. You literally simply say, 5, it's the reason behind it, before I explain what to do, is you're calming the neurophysiology in your brain. So you are calming down the neurochemicals, the energy in the brain waves, you're calming down the physiology in the body, you're calming down all those networks. I just published a paper a couple of months back on how the one wave in the brain, called the beta wave in the brain, which is, if you think of the waves of the sea, the beta energy wave in the brain is a bit like, the waves when they grow, the ones that surface love, that would be considered beta energy in the brain. So the brain waves in the brain are literally like waves of the sea, and they're different. We have names for the different sizes and frequencies of the waves. And the beta wave is the one that's building to a crest and then has a crest and then crashes on the beach. So that wave, beta and high beta. What we see when people are anxious is that the beta wave will build, and the bigger it gets, the more anxiety there is. And so we want it to be a certain height, and it's different for every person. For you, it might be here. For me, it might be there. For someone else, it might be there. But when it's there consistently, that's when anxiety is tipped. So what we want to do is, if it's starting to climb, all these brain preparation techniques, of which the 5-4-3-2-1 or the 3-2-1 or the 3-7 breathing, all of those start bringing the beta back down to what we call the Goldilocks principle, which is the ideal for you to be able to be focused. So that's the principle operating, because when that wave is up there, then it tells your neurochemicals to go crazy, and then that tells your heart to do something, to go a bit crazy, and then your stress axis goes crazy, and you get this downward reaction that's trying to help you, but it can make you feel worse. Okay, so in fact, you could start with 5 things that you can see, 5 things that you can smell, 4 things that you can smell, 3 things that you can taste, 2 things that you can feel, and 1 thing that you can hear, whichever way around you want to do it. And it just takes your mind off what's in at the moment. And as you're doing it, you're bringing the wave down. If you don't have time to do 5, you could literally just do 1. You could just say, what can you see? Okay, describe what you can see. So I can see my dog. Okay, describe your dog. And so anything where you're distracting, but it's focusing in and zoning in on something. And the counting thing is really great. 5, 4, you've got to really think, what are 5 things? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that adds another exercise that is a very routine, a very regular, not routine, it's a sequential process. And as soon as you do anything sequential, you start lowering the beta energy in the brain. So that's the principle operating there.
I love that. I love the idea of normalcy too, and knowing that we all have a little bit of anxiousness, and that's the way God made us. That's the way we're supposed to be. I love that. I've never really heard it just that way before, and it seems like now, and it seems like I haven't heard it that way because now it's such a negative connotation.
Exactly. So that's the first thing I love to tell parents. One of the first questions you asked me was, for a parent, what's the best thing? Knowing that anxiety and depression are not bad,
Mm.
that they are normal. And sometimes they may have tipped. And if they've tipped, you can actually restore them and make them useful. Just think about this. If a child is consistently being bullied at school, I would be depressed. Wouldn't you be depressed if you're consistently bullied? That's a very normal reaction to an adverse circumstance. So instead of trying to eliminate the depression, which is what the biomedical model will do, and say, oh, your child's got clinical depression, let's give you drugs, which numbs the brain and then disables the brain from working as well when you try and do this mind work, that doesn't help. That just constrains. It's like putting you in a straitjacket. Like a medical, like a literally chemical straitjacket. What we want to do is say, I see that you are feeling depressed. That's a valid feeling. Let's see why you're feeling like that. That's where you work through the neurocycle. So as you're talking about it, you take the energy, because that depression is going to make the beta wave that does the opposite. When you feel depressed, anxiety makes the beta wave grow big. depression makes the beta wave flatten. So we don't want flat line. We don't want Lake Placid. We don't want a flat line. We want, and that flat line also will look different for every person. We want just the right Goldilocks principle. Not too hot, not too hot, not too cold, just right. Not too sweet, not too salty, just right. That's what we want with our, so we wanted just the right amount. That's why everyone's got their own Goldilocks principle. You've got to have just the right amount of depression, just the right amount of anxiety for you to function as a human, just the right amount of stress, just the right amount of envy and jealousy, which keeps that balance all the time. So it's all about balance. Currently, the model would look at things like the brain waves, and they use them as a biomarker, like we use lack of insulin in the pancreas is a biomarker of diabetes type 1. They will use, flat line, that is what a depressed brain looks like. That's a sign of clinical depression. That is an incorrect statement. I use QEEG in my research, and when we see a flat line, or when you see it comes out as like a blue color, with very low energy, we don't see that as a biomarker of clinical depression. We see that as a description of a person who's not managing their mind, and they've gone into a depressed state, and there's a reason why. Let's find the cause. When we find the cause, whoops, we can flip the depression back up into the right state. Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense. I love it. I want to close down with one quote that I just loved. I don't know if it was in your book or somewhere I was researching, but it says that, quote, parenting isn't about what our child does. It's about how we respond. And I talk a lot about mental performance coaching with athletes, and a lot of it is the same exact thing. We don't control, Dr. Caroline, the events that happen to us on the field or in practice or at school, but we control how we respond. I haven't heard it from a parenting perspective, but I just want to close down with what a powerful statement. Parenting isn't about what our child does, it's how we respond. And that's the neurocycle. That's what you're doing. Why don't we close down by talking about that quote?
Absolutely. Well, it's all about responses, because that's our mind action, and we're not driven by our brain. We're driven by our mind. Our mind is our aliveness, and it's without our mind, our brain doesn't do anything anyway. You're just dead. So your mind is a combination of messiness and wisdom, and messiness is kind of our modus operandi. So we need our wisdom to kind of balance that out. And so therefore, that's the response concept. So when we manage our mind management enables us to then manage, like those examples we talked about. How do I manage my reactivity? Doing that little exercise in the kitchen with the mind, with the neurocycle. All of that is teaching us to respond. A child who's feeling overwhelmed, having that area in your house where they can walk home from school and go and sit in that bench and pick up the toy, you're giving them the ability to respond. So the parenting role is shifted to equipping your child with the tools to tell their story, and equipping yourself with with tools to tell your story. And in that way you can respond to each other and not react. Can't change what's happened to you, can't control events and circumstances, but you can learn to control your responses.
Hmm. What a great place to end this. For my listeners out there, they need to get the book, How to Help Your Child Clean Up Their Mental Mess. It comes out today, August 8th. Where can they get it? And how else can we support you, Dr. Caroline?
Thank you. Wherever books are sold, they can get that. And if they want to get the Brainy and the coloring book, that's available on our website. They can get that as a little kit as well. And the best place is probably social media, Dr. Caroline Leaf. You can get everywhere from there. And my webpage is drleaf.com.
Thank you so much for taking the time to come back on the show. Every time I talk to you, I just feel more and more exuberance and excitement. And I just love the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much, DJ. And thanks for your great questions. I love them.